How are you?
Hi, good morning. How are you doing, Theresa?
I am wonderful, and how are you doing?
Pretty good, thank you. So I'm so glad that you come back and talk some more about your
Women? Well, you start learning things. When I was a kid, that statement, children should be seen and not heard. The problem with that concept, children can hear what you're talking about. Uh, but my oldest memory of seeing something very different was my second grade teacher was having a baby. And you couldn't work if you were having a baby. There was something about your abdomen, your womb, and your brain. One can't work without the mother. They had all kinds of theories on women. And uh, Phil, I, he had a TV show on for years, and he brought that to the front, and so did uh, what's that show on? You see, my mind is going about women and their needs, always talking about, well, they're upset because they can't control their ovaries, which was, women were dying because people put all of these very stupid things up. So once you were pregnant, you couldn't go back to work, uh, and until your child was 5 years old. And as a child, you're wondering where your teacher is. Uh, so I don't remember her name. I do remember some of my teachers' names. But those are the kind of draconian laws they had for women. When I worked at Manufacturers Hanover, those who are listening to that know that that was a big bank in New York. And women were pregnant. And of course, they had to leave by 5 months because you don't want to upset men seeing a woman pregnant. Isn't that horrifying? So they would have their baby over the weekend and come back maybe a few days after the baby was born and say, oh, I had a premature baby. Yeah, but the problem was the baby is 8 pounds. And these are the things that women did. And there's a difference between a clerical job and a teaching job. A teaching job, there's an assumption that you have somebody there to take care of your child. But clerical jobs, you didn't have that. You had to come back to work. That it's always been. If no matter who you are, if you make it, it's because you and your mate work together. When I got my graduate degree, and especially from Columbia, right, I was put on a lot of panels in in Westchester. I would be the only Black woman there, and the people who organized these panels were basically from a true middle income family. And so they saw people like myself as the girl. And every time I was on these panels, I would have to interrupt and say, how about the women who worked at Woolworths? How about the women who cleaned your house or worked at chock full of nuts? All of these low entry jobs where you made no more than minimum wage. When I started working in 63, minimum wage was $1 an hour. So the women didn't get much. But prior to that, I want to talk about, and this is something I really want your audience to hear, because women can't oppress other women. And I hope I'm making that clear. When I was 17 or 18, I don't remember exactly the age, I was in dancing school, and one of the people I became friendly with invited me over to her house, and her family and friends were there. She came from a big family, but there was only maybe 6 people there. And they started talking about, they didn't have a name for it. And I can't even remember my former friend's name. She was the youngest of something like 9 kids. And she talked about her mother would go up on 174th Street Station or 177th Street, and that's the street you get off to go to the Bronx Zoo. And she would be there to get a day's work. A day's work, they would look at your knuckles and look at your knees. And if they weren't bruised, they would not hire you. And you would get maybe $2 for the whole day. And you have to place it in times of what income was. If I started off with $1.50 a day, I mean $1 an hour, these people work for maybe no more than $3 a day. And they were given, if they had a sandwich, they would take 25 cents away from what they would get. If they had, sometimes the people would give them clothes, and they would take something away from their salary. And very often, the women who were the cleaning women were more educated than the women who made them clean. The oppression of these people were something that we don't even see today. These are Americans. And you had to scrub real hard. You had to be on your knees and your knuckles and scrub. You know, when you talk about, oh, somebody has a wash machine, that was not a reality for women. You had a clothesline. And I grew up in the Bronx, Washington Avenue, and people didn't have washing machines then. And you scrubbed and scrubbed, and then you put it on the line. But now you're scrubbing for somebody else, and you put it on the clothesline. And you took it off, you ironed. And if you iron curtains, there was this big rectangle equipment that you put curtains on to stretch them out. Irons were not, there's no concept. You'll find this in a museum. And one time I went to Weeksville with my daughter and Bryce and some of her friends, and kids who are Bryce's age, they said, "What's that?" Those were irons. And you put this coil in, which was thick, and you heat up the iron, and the iron felt like it was 10, 20 pounds. So not only did you do this for someone else who was somewhat abusive, that you had to go home and do it for yourself, which caused many families who had the oldest child was a girl, was that became the mother of all of the children. Maybe 6, 7 years ago, no more than that, PBS had on a program, and this is the first time I heard the name of it, maybe longer than that, because I taught this in my class, because what they were telling me when I was 17, I couldn't believe that you go to work and people look at your knuckles and people look at your knees to see if you're good enough to work for them that day, whether you knew how to scrub. So I was teaching at Lehman. It might have been 15 years ago, because I would tell them about it. The official name was the Bronx Slave Market. Look it up. And Ella Baker did a whole expose on this, how women were treated. You had to stand out in the cold. Now, 174th Street, what they told me was that this is the young woman who told me, whose mother was into this, and this had to be in the 60s, right? Is that you didn't, if they don't take you for the day, you need to go back home. And I know at that, no, she was much older than my mother. So this had to be in the 20s or 30s. And it was only a nickel to get on the subway. But you couldn't waste a nickel. So they would look at your knees and they would say, "I want you. I want you." Just as if we were on some sort of marketplace. They're choosing us. So it must have been, now we're looking at 20 years ago, this must have come out. Because I've been away from Lehman 9 years, and I gave these assignment classes. But they did a whole study on the Jerome Avenue train, number 4. And what this young woman was telling me, we were all young at the time, that they did this on the number 2 and the number 5 train. They would look at your knees and all of those kinds of things. That's how women lived, and they still had to go home and care for their children. And you find out in a lot of these families that had big families, 6, 7, 8, 9 kids, that the oldest girl especially became the pseudo parent. And that was a thing. And I know when I was a kid, it was the girls who, when you came home from school, you had to take the clothes to the laundry, you had to clean the kitchen. But, you know, that's lightweight to what I'm talking about now, what the emphasis is now on how women, poor women, were treated. And in Rockland County, and I was on TV a few weeks ago, PBS again, thank God for PBS, they have maintained some of this history, that the Irish, they would say, we want no black, they didn't use the word black, they used the word Negro, no black, no Irish. And that was a long tradition up until the 70s, I understand. And these were people, don't think everybody's, what do you call it, an immigrant. No, these were just poor women who wanted their children to have better lives. One of my students, who was about my age, her name was Benjamin, I have all kinds of things that students have to do in college, because my concept is, I don't need to have you do a true or false or multiple choice. You learn nothing. I wanted them to do the kind of research. And she said, can I do the research on what they did to poor women in factories? I said, go on. And she wrote about that a lot of women she knew who worked in factories had fingers amputated. And if we read The Jungle, that's what that was about. And in New York, I can't talk about anywhere else, Westinghouse was one of the schools that was developed to teach people to do rudimentary reading, because they have these machines here and I can't read it. Those letters could be in a completely Russian, Chinese, any kind of language, and I wouldn't know what it said. So she wrote about women losing their fingers. And don't forget, tough luck, come back to work. The Jungle by Sinclair Lewis, I believe his name is, talked about some of the fingers would go into your sausages. These were jobs for women. So, you know, I'm talking now about people's grandmothers and great-grandmothers. And if they don't tell you these horror stories, you don't know what it is. When I was 15, there were ads in the newspaper, the New York Post, Daily News, for mothers' helpers. And my best friends, we would call each other cousins. Her mother let her go to Long Island. And Mommy, I want to be one too. I want to earn money this summer, because it's like $15 a week. And my mother says, absolutely not. She was a mother's helper. And when my friend came back from the summer helping women, you weren't the mother's helpers. This was an extension of the Bronx slave market. You're 15, you're taking care of people's children, you're washing the people's clothes, you're preparing their food, and you're cleaning their homes. You're 15. You're a kid by anybody's standards. It was, I think it was Roosevelt, in the 1912, they did the Conference on Children. The first time, so we're not talking about oh, this is 1,000 years ago, that they recognized that these were children. And why, and what they also started in New York, I can't talk about other states, were kindergartens, because women had to work. And how do you work if you got kids? You keep them in school. And that's what women did. So people talk about, oh, women, oh, they had to, they stayed home. No, staying home was a full-time job. My friend got $15 a week, and the whole summer, what is it? $60 you come home with? I got a little bit more than that in just plain babysitting, not doing any clothes. If they were clothes, they were washed. All I had to do was fold them and wash dishes. So we have women subjugating other women. And many women talk about now, where were you when your mother was doing that? People my age, I can talk about. When your mother 70, 80 years ago was doing that, and you called, and you talk about being liberal, but you're not liberal to women, poor women. They stay poor because many of those people scrubbing your floors had an education, but didn't have the advancement into jobs. They could be clerks. Yes, that was big time if you were a clerk, or a teacher or a nurse, but those were your options. And, I taught for years courses on women. Who takes care of your child when you're taking care of somebody else's child? That's that kind of friction dichotomy was true. I can't talk about New Jersey or Connecticut because I don't know about that, but I'm sure it was similar. Working hard and getting no money for it. Another thing, and people my age can certainly remember it. I worked at Westinghouse, and wasn't that irony? Because they were the ones that called upon women to learn how to do basic reading. But I worked at Westinghouse, and my dad did too, but he was in New Jersey and I was in New York. And I remember girls in junior high school, elementary school, high school, you had to wear skirts or dress. And I worked at Westinghouse when I was from 22 to 24. Well, no, 23 to 24. And we heard the news that women could wear pants. Now you see, now you're thinking, now we're talking about children that are my age, that are my children's age. That's such a short time before they gave them rights to wear pants. And they came in with this sheet of paper to show you what kind of pants you have to wear. And they could only be pantsuits. But believe me, that was a liberating factor for women. And I was a key punch clerk. I mean, that's what you did. And to wear pants. So in the wintertime when it's freezing, I remember when I went to a party at the Renaissance, those people, that's around 155th Street and 8th Avenue, somewhere around there. And I, as women always do, you're finally able to go to a party and you got this short skirt on and you're freezing. So let's move to, or either you're going to work and you got to wait on a bus. So women were allowed to wear pants. That had to be in 69, 70. So those women are 50 years old now. That's how long, that's what it took for us to wear pants to work. These things were draconian. You couldn't, my other good friend, she was my roommate, had a child and she needed a job. And I'm, I'm just as fluffy in my mind. So I was working for Urban Trust Company. That's the bank that only people maybe as young as 40 may know of it, but no more. Now it's a Chase. It's still at One Wall Street. And my friend needed a job. And I went to the personnel office. Oh no, she has to be married. She can't work here with a child. Married, divorced, or widowed. But if you are not, you could not work there without having that category. So you say, oh, come on. Yeah, that was reality. That you were not able to, you had to have this phony idea of what, of being chased. Nobody, we were such a loyal, clean company where if you saw the apartment came out when I was a teenager with Jack Lemmon, I believe, and Shirley. Her brother acts under a different name, where she was used as, she worked every day, but she was used for men's sexual problem. But yet she can't have a job, but you can sneak around and use her body. And society was so crazy that if a woman was pregnant, she had to be sent away. You're disgracing the family. And you see lost families now where these same women who are my age want to know where their children, that they had to give up. You didn't have to give up for a physical reason. You had to give it up because you don't want to shame your child. I mean, the family. The family is everything. Yet the men were sneaking around doing what they had to do. And I know we asked then if a young person or person in their 30s gets pregnant, we don't say, are you going to give it away? Even if they're by themselves and it was an unexpected pregnancy, how can I help you? There was no consideration for women, even though I'm glad we have grown. So in college, undergraduate school, I was a fairly good student and I wanted to go to law school. And I go to at Lehman College, where later I worked for 35 years, right? So I heard that you had to get the application from my, I don't know, registrar somewhere over there. And I went, and there's assumption that women don't go to law school. The man says to me, well, you have to have a B average. Well, I had better than a B average. He was angry to give me the application. So so I got the application. I was never told that there were study groups, because some of these people would give it to men and have these little study groups. So I heard that there was a book on it, but you can't study from a book. And the test was at Fordham University. And I saw so many people walking out because they weren't given the same information that men were given. So I had a book, I completed it, but I did not, there was no way I could have done well. So since July, I've been retired from the board for 13 years. I'm studying law because so many of our dreams and aspirations were cut short. I never saw a female principal. I was only on one elementary school, but I never saw a female principal. I think her name was David Doff. I'm not sure. but I heard her, chilling the scene about her, but you could hear. And she was talking about being a female as a vice principal, as if it was some magical thing out of space coming, but you certainly didn't have the intellect to be a teacher. I mean, a principal. And though that you were teaching, 99% of elementary school teachers are women. Maybe 95%, not 99%. And it still is true. And it's only in the last, even when I started working at the board, I didn't see women principals, but yes, I did see 2 women principals.
So it's the Board of Education.
Yes.
Mhm.
So you can't think if you're a female, you know that. You have to be directed. And that was the type of trend that existed at that time. I'm so glad it's changed. But when are we going to have a chancellor that's a female? We have to, though they do have superintendents who are females, but that's only been in the last 20 years, to my knowledge. I'm sure somebody say, oh no, so-and-so was a principal 23 years ago. Perhaps. I don't know every school. But women have come a long way. And I think it's important that we have this discussion because it's only changed since everybody who's listening to me has been alive. These are not things that I'm glad I experienced. I wanted to do a paper on Fannie Lou Hamer. And I taught Black studies for 35 years, so I'm pretty familiar with kind of the literature out there. And when I found a book about her, it was in the children's library. And all the men were identified as leaders. If it wasn't for Ella Baker, we still might have the Bronx Slave Market. But she's not listed. When I heard her name, I had no idea who she was. Because we look at women as an appendix to a male. And if one reads Sojourner Truth, that woman was incredible. All we know about that is, I am a woman. Okay, where do we go? I didn't know anything about Eleanor Roosevelt. It wasn't taught in school. And she was living when I went to school. Her husband died before I was born, but she was living. And I remember very, 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 very well. I was in high school. The Kennedys, the wife, they claim had tantrum, was emotionally prone to outbursts. Well, her husband was going with Marilyn Monroe, was out there. And we're going to blame the woman when the husband is cheating on that behavior, on her behavior. She wrote, or I read somewhere, that she didn't go to Martin Luther King's funeral because he was a womanizer. Well, I don't know about that, but so was her husband. Women have a need to project bad behavior on women. Do you know what a train is? I'll tell you, since you're going to say, I don't know. I heard, I don't know the person, a young girl being raped by several boys. I don't know if they were in high school or older than high school, but you know whose fault it was. It was the girl's fault. Another woman said this. And I said, are you joking? So Phil Donahue, had world-breaking subjects about women on his show. Not whether, oh, I wear yellow on Friday, but serious subjects. about women and their womb, women in abuse, that we needed to hear. And here comes Oprah, who opens everything out to women being raped as children. Because society blamed women being raped on women. Well, if she wore the right dress, if her dress wasn't too short, if her dress wasn't tight, so let's say there are religions out there where the women wear their dresses long, doilies on their head or their head wrap, arms covered up. How about when they get raped? What are you going to blame it on now? But women have been taught to hate themselves and design themselves to a male's belief of what a woman should be. And when poor women, and especially Black women, carry a tremendous load. One third of Black men today have a prison record. 25% have had some serious relationship with the law. Very often, it is the woman who has to keep the family together. I used to give my students this paper, which said that Black women promiscuous. Black women, that's a whole bunch of people. And when you read the article, see, that's all you see is that headline. When you read the article, these two women went to a small area in Jamaica. How many people Jamaica have? Whose husbands were fishermen. And they took over. They had to do the household. They had to do bringing food to the market, disciplining children. But the writers, the authors of these types of things, see these women as lacking. And they blame the women for the situation they put in. I am so proud of these women, no matter who they are, who raise their children in spite of it. All of the negatives around them, in spite. You see, when you're doing this, you're not thinking of the negatives. You got to say, well, I got to get up in the morning. I got to do this. I got to take Johnny here and go to work and be home before he gets home from the after school program. And you're always thinking like that. And I'm not saying, because I worked in the school system a lot and then went back about 4 years ago just to work part-time in the afternoon. And yes, you did see men picking up the children, but far less men than women. If there were 40 kids, no more than that, in the afternoon program, you would see about 20% of the men picking up their children. So I'm not saying men are slacking. I'm just saying women take the brunt of the of whatever's happened. I'm so glad that we speak now. We understand what physical abuse is. I remember coming home from California, I don't know, 20, because I was in California. I lived there twice. Reading in, I think it was Glamour magazine, that women have to stop being beat by men. They must leave the situation. So you're talking about 50 years ago, and we're still talking about the same thing. And I'm sure Glamour has probably put this out time and time again. You do not have to be beat. And I remember one time, had a client, and I don't know if I'm sure my husband called me and talked about very briefly what to make the kids and myself for dinner. And the client turns around and says, "You told him that?" I said, "Yeah, but he's a man. I said he has children. So we're dealing with so many times, there's so many people in these very closed communities. The only outlet they get is from media or what, and they really believe that they should do it all. If they go to bed at 12 at night and get up at 5:30, that's okay. And every study that has been done for the last 30 years indicate that women do more of the housework than men. You go to a supermarket, yes, you see men there, especially men your age to 40. My boy kids always knew that they had very clear chores in the house, and the chores integrated with the girls. So one week you're in charge of the kitchen cleaning, and the next week the other one is. But when you're in this small nucleus and all you see too often is of mental abuse of women, physical abuse of women, young girls being sexually taken advantage of, abused, you have a very micro focus of what is happening around you, and that you have the right. There are people still, women still give their paychecks over to their husbands or the male in the family. I had male clients tell me that, yeah, when she gets paid, I just take her check. So women are still being abused, but at the good time, I am so glad when I saw on TV all these women going into Congress. Letitia James being our not, is it Attorney General? I'm almost sure. I could not have fashioned that 20 years ago. That's where we've gone. I am cousins sitting there as the chair of it all. She's the grande dame. And I remember when she was knocking on doors to sign her petition. So I think I was born 5 years too early, because what women are doing who are 5 years younger than me, the whole idea that you could wear pants to work, that came, I had been working at least out of high school 5 years before people could do that. The whole idea that you could be president of a corporation, but we still leave these poor women and working class women behind. When the whole thing that you can't write things in books because they're hurtful. I mean, you're bringing down a half of your nation. The whole idea of, and I'm not saying good or bad, making no thing of it, that many of these men who make remarks to women have daughters of their own. And that's very difficult to fashion. The whole idea is that you could be superintendent of there's 32 districts, school districts in New York City, that you could be superintendent of one of them. I'm telling you, when I was a kid, I only had one vice principal, and she came the year that I left, maybe when I was in the 6th grade. Phenomenal. The whole idea of, and I've witnessed that, and it's happened to me also, that you can be pregnant. One of the young women, when she was having a baby, she says, I got to finish my notes. I got to do my IEP. And the principal's even saying, get out of here and get to the hospital immediately. And when she arrived in the hospital, within minutes, she gave birth. That was not a concept 40 years ago. That you can have a baby and still work, because the womb was intricately involved with your brain. And you can't have a womb and a brain functioning at the same time. You're saying your head, yes, think about that. Think of how backwards we've been. And I found, just from observation, that the West, because the West matured at a different time than the East, that women there have been much more progressive. When I was out west, I saw women, Arizona, riding conductor of buses, bus drivers. I've seen that maybe 2 to 3 times in New York. Now I think it's changed, and I'm not working, so I don't go down to the Bronx as often as I used to. Women as people who sell tickets to get on the train. Those were men jobs. And how brilliant do you have to be to sell a ticket? And that's why the upheaval came, because you were taking away a man's job. And you can't take away a man's job. They had very structured lives. So during the war, my mother was one of them. Women who worked in enabling the troops. My mother, I'm almost sure she said she had a bike. I'm not, but I can't be positive of that. Would do the unfortunate business of working for Western Union and saying, Mr. Walsh, your son has died in the war. So they had women, they were on machines, they were doing various things to support the war. And right after they came, the war was over, women had to retreat to being the smiling house cleaner with heels. Who cleans the house with heels? Look at that from 1950. There was a whole conspiracy, and I don't say this lightly, we're going to put you back in your place. So you had the heels and washing the floor, and who does that? Washing dishes with a nice dress on that you would go to church in. And that's another thing. Even the church has changed. When I was a child, you had to wear a dress and something on your head. That's garbage now. There's a whole new thinking that you have to come to God and God accepts you in any way. But then no, God couldn't accept you if you wore pants, because God gave some man the idea that you can't do that with a woman. She has to wear a dress. And some people, I heard it 2019, someone saying to me, we were giving we were celebrating seniors, and someone said to me, one of the very young women was doing the serving, working her behind off, and someone says to me, look at her, she's in pants. Someone needs to tell her that this is church. And I said to the woman, God doesn't care. She's here. She could be somewhere else. God doesn't care about that. So I'm not, the woman was in her 90s, and she's carrying things over from 1930, late 1920s. Look at her. Disgusting. I was trying to be nice, but I had to laugh. I had to, are you kidding me? God has got, you know what? God says, it's not a Dior dress or Chanel. I can't accept you. Or is that our structure? But my point is also, this is another woman doing this to a woman. Yeah, they're 70 years apart. But sometimes we are our worst enemy. Sometimes, not all times. But sometimes we are. I think with women emerging as CEOs, and there's not many, but some, that we're going to see a better day for my daughters. And if you have children, or going to have a child, or if you never have children, you just have a niece, let them know that they're important. I mean, when we go up in one of those rocket ships, that's a celebration. It was when I started college, I'm from Edenwald Projects. Two of my, as they say, bestie, or what is she trying to be? I'm trying to be anything. I just wanted to go where people I went to school with went. I'm sure no one would say that Bronx community is the creme de la creme. It's a community college. But this is women. Instead of encouraging women, too often we put them down. I remember when I had my first child, I used to carry her on my back and that backside. And I would go to parks, to other people who thought like me. And someone said to me, "You're a mother now. You can't do that." Are you kidding me? There are women who believe. What, are you saying I have to stop living? So we've come a long way, but we still have a way to go. But I'm saying to everyone out there, if you're a female, I'm not talking to the males, don't abuse your right of being a female. When I was graduating from the master's program at Columbia, someone said to me, "Whoopee," just like that. I was proud of myself. Now, I graduated in 75, so a lot of people weren't even born. And two of my children weren't born in 75. I remember the head of Unite, not yet, yeah, Greater New York Fund. That was my field placement. And you know, they always have something for the students when you're graduating. And you know what he said to me? "What you need to do, Theresa, is to go find a man and get married and have children." That's what was said to me. He had no idea that I was married and I had two children. Had no idea. Columbia, I hope you hear this. Uh, it is not something that I chose to tell. I felt very bad about it the whole time. But I had two children, and I knew you would not accept me into your university if I said two children. But they do the same thing now. They don't say, "Miss Walsh, what are you going to do with Michael? I mean, he is a baby. How are you going to care for? How can you care for him and read at the same time?" I mean, that's an impossibility, isn't it? And when I interviewed, I literally interviewed less than a month after Desi was born. And Desi is a doctor, and Io Deli is a speech pathologist. But they carry these falsehoods. And believe me right now, women are still told on an interview, and they have to say yes, or else they won't get the job. But yet, if they find out that you didn't tell the truth, they can fire you. Deal with that conundrum. "Miss Walsh, will you have more than one child?" I mean, I want to know how you're going to do that. No one asked a man that. My former husband, who's a fireman, nobody said to him, "Well, Mr. Higgs, you have two children. Just suppose we called you on an emergency. What are you going to do?" No one asked him that. They want to know, how can you do the job? But these are asked of women every day. Somebody is interviewing right now, and they're being asked this. And if you find out that Miss Walsh has two children and didn't tell you, well, you know, we have to fire you because you lied. But you know, if I told the truth, you wouldn't hire me. My daughter is married to, oh, she's married. And I have this thing, you know, that I want to know everybody's history. And she's like 15 years my senior. And before I even had children, but I used one of them because it was given to me, a coach. This is a very heavy carriage that literally looks like what a princess and her prince would ride in it, a baby carriage. She said she had, to my knowledge, 6 children. So I hope you hear me, Miss Lyon. She had to walk up the steps, bring it to the 5th floor. And I said, but when you were having children, I remember very well, I was in the lower Bronx at that time, that you could put the baby carriage under the steps on the first landing. She said her super wouldn't approve. Do you have any idea how heavy those carriages are? And when I interviewed the lady, must have been September, because she gave a, what do you call it, a shower for my daughter and my son-in-law. She said that that's how it was. Would he have told her husband that? I guarantee not. It was the thing. And if you still go into some older buildings in New York, the carriages are under the steps. I'm telling you, this is a whole new day. What we're seeing now is a whole new day. It was unconscionable what they did to women. And if you weren't married, which I wasn't, by 25, there was something sexually wrong with you. People said it to me. You must like. No, I had things to do. I lived in California. I came back and went to college. But the assumption isn't that uh, I traveled, but there's something wrong with me. So I know I'm going to end this now, and I hope that your audience learns something. People my age and older will know exactly what I'm talking about. Even 60 and older know exactly. And people that are younger, hope you learned something. Please write to Mr. Walsh at the Yonkers Library on Central Avenue and ask him questions, and I will respond to you. Ask. I'm open. One more thing I like to say, and people still do it. Call women old enough to be their grandchildren, girl. And when someone says that to me, several people have said it to me. I'm not a girl. And some women feel that they're being flattered calling a girl. You call me the same thing that you would call a man, Mr., Ms., or Miss. I am so clear on that. And as young as 8 years old, I knew that Elizabeth Taylor had her name. And I always kept my name Murphy. And when my former husband and I were buying our house, even though I said my name was Murphy, they put Higgs on our contract. They erased me. No, you're not a Murphy, you're a Higgs. No. I remember when I brought my daughter to school for the first time, and that's a happy time in your life. Aren't you a Higgs? No, my name is Murphy. Well, I knew your husband and his sisters. My name is Murphy. And I say that today. So I was clear at 8 years old. I was going to keep my name. Now women have choices. My daughter is going to change her name completely to Murphy being her middle name, Higgs Theresa, her last name. But we've changed, and you know, people say, okay, that's fine. Keep your name. But that's important. I'm who I am. I am not your woman. I'm your wife. And when I met my husband, some of his friends said, "You're old lady." And I would say, I'm not an old lady. Maybe you're talking about his mother. But I was clear for the past, how many years? Close to 70 years, that I'm Theresa Murphy. So I want everybody, your choice, to keep your name, keep who you are. And you just make your mate stronger by being who you are. Thank you, Mr. Walsh, for inviting me over. I hope I answered all of your questions.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Theresa, for your message and for your memories. It was great to hear you.
Yeah, it's my memories. Thank you.
Okay,
What
thank you.
can I